Okay, guys, this is something that I've been wanting to make a video about for a while now. I first learned about this probably when I was about 18, so 1998 or so. I got my first introduction into this information. And a lot of people don't know about it. So I figured it'd be a good story for you guys, and just an all-around mind-opening information. Okay, I'm going to be talking about the Montauk Project. Okay, this took place in either Camp Hero or Montauk Air Force Station, which is on Montauk, Long Island, New York. The Montauk Project is an alleged series of secret United States government projects for the purpose of developing psychological warfare techniques and exotic research, including time travel. Jacques Follée described allegations of the Montauk Project as outgrowth of stories about the Philadelphia experiment. The history of the Montauk Project story is closely associated with and often believed to originate in the Montauk Project series of books by Preston Nicholas. Now, the Philadelphia experiment, I'll have to do a whole separate video on that. So right now I'm just going to talk to you about the Montauk Project. Stories about the Montauk Project have circulated since early 1980s. According to UFO researcher Jacques Follée, the Montauk experiment stories seem to have originated with the account of Preston Nicholas, who claimed to have recovered repressed memories of his own involvement. Nicholas was born May 24th, 1946, on Long Island, New York. Claims to have degrees in parapsychology, psychology, and electric engineering. And he has authored a series of books known as the Montauk Project series, along with Peter Moon, the primary topic of which is alleged activities at Montauk. These center on topics: United States government military experiments in fields such as time travel, teleportation, mind control, contact with alien life, and staging faked Apollo moon landings, framed as developments which followed a successful 1943 Philadelphia experiment. These culminate in a hole ripped in space-time in 1983. The authors have encouraged speculation about the contents. For example, they wrote, whether you read this as science fiction or nonfiction, you are in for an amazing story. In their first chapters, describing much of the content as soft facts in a guide for readers, and publishing a newspaper with updates to stories. Nicholas's participation at Montauk. Some sources report that Nicholas's claim to have worked on the Montauk Project and recalls it only through recovery of repressed memories. Others hold that he believes he is periodically abducted to continue his participation against his will. Most treat Nicholas's work as fiction. Now, remember, when you're dealing with mind control, of course they're going to suppress these memories back in your brain so that you don't always remember them. And usually the only way of getting to those kind of memories is by hypnosis, which is what they're saying he has done in order to get these repressed memories back to his actual memories. And then the fact of him feeling periodically abducted to continue participating is also a definite possibility. Because remember, when you're dealing with mind control in general, once they tap in, they tap in. So they could pretty much tap in whenever the hell they feel like it, for whatever reasons they feel like it. So you don't have to physically be in that vicinity for them to, tap into your mind at that point. So that's just a basic roundabout what do you call backgrounds on that. I'm gonna go into the little bit of Nickel Preston's memories of this, because he's the one that pretty much brought this, even though there were rumors of the Montauk Project, and a lot of people who live in Long Island or live close to Montauk did say that they remember strange shit going on over there. Military oriented stuff that your average everyday person wasn't allowed near. And also now they don't allow anybody on that premises due to the high radiation content. So something definitely went on there. Everybody knows something went on there. Whether people want to admit it or not, you know how people are. Everybody likes to play the role that they don't know what's going on, and they do know what's going on. So I'm gonna go with Nicholas's account of this. I'm just trying to see what's the best way to look this up. As far as the info, like in his books, obviously I can't read you all the books, but I'm going to just kind of like go through, skim through, see what stands out to me here about this. There is very limited resource, I think only because of the importance of what they were doing out there, and the fact that obviously they shouldn't have been doing what they were doing, which is usually what the military does. So, and they're also making these things go extremely slow for me, so I can't read you, okay? As far as government cover-ups go, the Montauk Project may be one of the most well-guarded secret government projects that ever existed. The Montauk experiment is basically the Area 51 of New England, and stories about the projects, the time travel experiments, use of alien technology, and research into telekinesis have managed to both enthrall and terrify conspiracy theorists as the government shut down the Roswell of the North's experiments in early 1980s. The Montauk Project's U.S. government time travel research program intersects with multiple alleged secret government programs, including the Philadelphia Project, where an entire battleship was said to have disappeared from the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard in 1943. And remember, I told you I'm going to do that as a separate video. More so than any other conspiracy theory, the Montauk Project feels very real. Admittingly, the idea that 10-year-old boys are being sent to Mars is pretty far-fetched, but the government getting excited about mass hypnosis via radar tower. That seems like something that was definitely discussed at one point in time, and you can argue that they were successful and in a less sci-fi way. Even if you don't believe in government cover-ups, that involve time travel, teleportation, and physical manifestation of monsters from inside your own minds, the Montauk Project is a lot of fun to read about, and when you finally have a run-in with somebody from the 1980s, you'll probably be happy that you boned up on your knowledge about secret government projects. Now, I've actually been to the Montauk site, and that's how I know that the site is full of radiation. There's signs all over the fence in old Air Force Base saying, please stay out, high radiation content. So I know that it was the Montauk Project was actually there. To know exactly 100% what they were doing, you would have had to have been there, or you would have had to have known somebody who was brought there for their abilities or what have you. But getting back to this. The government chose the tiny town of Montauk, New York, to keep its secrets. Montauk, New York isn't even a town. It's technically a hamlet, which is a community that's smaller than a village, or that doesn't have a church. With a popularity of 3,326 people as of 2010, it's the perfect place for Camp Hero, which would supposedly house a secret military installation which would devolve into time travel, teleportation, psychic warfare, and object creation research. The most recognizable piece of this 270-acre site is the Sage Radar Tower. A 120-foot, 70-ton dish, which has fallen into despair since the area was donated to the state of New York as a federal park, which you would not want to go in. The dish was believed to transmit radio signals in the 425 to 450 megahertz range in order to penetrate human consciousness, making a person susceptible to mind control. If that's the kind of thing you were working on, wouldn't you want to house your research station somewhere out of the way? So just imagine how many people were affected by what they were doing. People who weren't even involved in the project, just the vicinity itself. What they would have gone through with these experiments going on. While the U.S. government had supposedly been researching psychological warfare, invisibility, and teleportation prior to their move to Montauk, the project didn't begin in earnest until 1971, when researchers moved into the decommissioned base to begin Phoenix 2, which a group of military scientists, government workers, and civilian contractors. The original Phoenix Project was a classified CIA operation where military carried out targeted assassinations of members of the National Libertarian Front that occurred in Vietnam in the early 1970s. Numerous military servicemen and Air Force radar technicians who had worked with Sage radar system throughout the 60s were put on the Montauk Project and stayed on until the end ended in a disastrous experiment in 1982 that connected the researchers at Montauk with researchers on the USS Eldridge some 40 years prior. But more about that later. Okay? If you're thinking that the government kept their super secret time travel porthole underground because they didn't want people seeing what they were doing, you're totally wrong. According to Preston Nicholas, a scientist who worked at Montauk, the portal had to be built underground because of construction issues, and they probably didn't want people knowing what they were up to. In an interview with the website Forbidden Knowledge, Nicholas explained they had trouble building this above ground because when they started to test above ground, the fields from transmitting equipment were so strong that they had to locate it low enough below ground that there would be no neutral point between fields of equipment. Also, they wanted to make it big enough. I think it was 250 feet, and this one was 10 foot. I think the one we had in Montauk was 250 feet to 350 feet, something like that. Of course, above ground, there would have been certain construction problems with making the thing below ground, where they have the undergrounders making holes in the floor and pass the pipes and wires through the floor, and the thing up, you don't have to worry about the wind going to blow or any of that. Okay? The first big test of Montauk's Sage Disk occurred after researchers developed that the general mood of the base changed depending on the frequency and pulse duration of the radar system. The Phoenix 2 scientists realized that by changing the rate of width of pulse, they could alter the way people felt. They experimented with making people laugh, cry, get angry, and get sleepy. In 1973, the researchers moved on to testing whether or not they can alter the thoughts of a large group of people at once. They initially experimented on soldiers who believed they were at the base for R&R, rest and relaxation, before moving on to civilians in Long Island, New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. There are no record of what was done to the citizens of those states specifically, but this wouldn't be the first time that the U.S. government performed tests on civilians without their knowledge. Now, with that being said, Long Island does have the most psychiatric hospitals in the country. So, if that doesn't tell you something, I don't know what, I don't know what to tell you about that. These people, after these things were done to them and these tests were done to them, they went mad, basically. So they had to build more and more mental hospitals to facilitate these people, and to facilitate them close enough where they had an eye on who was going in and out, what they were saying, etc., etc., if you get my drift. Okay. Now, the Montauk chair allowed people to focus their psychic abilities, okay? Which I had told you that, like I mentioned how they had psychics hooked up to chairs and they were reading their wavelengths from their brain. Aside from the Sage Disk, one of the most important pieces of technology in the Montauk Project was the Montauk chair, a device that used to boost a test subject's psychic energy in order to help them perform a variety of tasks. No one knows or remembers where the chair's technology came from, although it is most likely that most, if not all, of the chair's parts came from extraterrestrial technology. The first version of this chair went online in 1974 and allowed psychically active persons to transmit their thoughts to a second base in Southampton, Long Island. But a problem began to occur with psychics transmitting a false reality, which created something called time glitches. These glitches were bad enough that they were cause for the construction of the second chair, which would be used throughout the rest of the Montauk Project's existence. Supposedly, a third chair was set up in Britain on the Thames River. So here we have it being connected to the British. The Montauk chair made spontaneous object creation possible. The most accomplished member of the Montauk's team of psychic researchers was Buchanan Cameron. Began to work on creating solo projects via telekinesis thanks to the increase in psychic energy from the Montauk chair. The idea behind spontaneous object creation was for Buchanan to visualize an object, a watch, a gun, or even some people have said a building, and materialize it somewhere on the base. According to the researchers from the Montauk Project, depending on the amount of power Cameron drew from the chair, he could create permanent objects, limited only by his imagination. However, if he received a weak signal, many of the items would remain tangible or fade as soon as the chair power source was turned off. In the seeing eye experiment, researchers could remotely control people's thoughts and behaviors. After Cameron mastered creating objects with his mind, researchers began to experiment on manipulating the human mind. This continuation of the project was allegedly referred to as the seeing eye. During this experiment, Cameron was given a lock of hair, an object that was important to a person, and by focusing his psychic energy, he could see and hear everything that person was experiencing, no matter where they were. After Buchanan was able to successfully relay information with the seeing eye, researchers at Montauk began to experiment with using a psychic soldier's thoughts to project an alternative reality on a target as a form of psyop warfare. They attempted to program people and animals to act in a variety of strange ways, and it is believed that they had some success with this. However, there is no concrete evidence of anyone being psychically controlled via the Montauk chair. Now, like I said to you about the amount of mental hospitals on Long Island, it's obvious that the outcome to all of this on people was not a good outcome. Probably mainly because they didn't know when to stop, and the people were exhausted mentally, physically, and spiritually, and just couldn't take it anymore and lost their fucking minds. Animals, who knows how many animals they killed in that place, because nobody ever cares about those numbers. But it's obvious that the outcome of them continuing to do this to the same people over and over and over again had a very bad outcome for them. And it gets better. They kidnapped homeless people to send them on dangerous time travel missions. After the success of the spontaneous object creation project, it was discovered that a side effect of the tests was that the flow of time was altered when objects that were being materialized appeared earlier or later than they were meant to. This caused Montauk to enter a third phase of research. It was found that by focusing their psychic energy, guys like Buchanan Cameron could open what was referred to as a time tunnel. As you can imagine, initial visions of the time tunnels were not constructively sound, and rather than send government researchers to certain doom, they allegedly began to kidnap large numbers of homeless people to test on. According to the researchers, scientists at the Montauk Project would spend a week prepping the men and women for their trips through time. If they managed to return, they were expected to make a full report of what they found on the other side. It is believed that most of the test subjects never returned, however. Members of the Montauk Boys program traveled thousands of years into the past and into the future. Aside from sending homeless people through time, the researchers at Montauk also established a boys' brigade of all-male, blonde-haired, blue-eyed Caucasians in order to travel through time. According to the survivors of the Montauk Boys program, children were chosen due to their naive sensibilities and openness to whatever they would find on the other side of the tunnels. It's believed that many of the boys were sent to the year 6037 AD in order to investigate a ruined city and examine the statue of a horse before reporting back on what they found. There are also stories of MBP members viewing events from World Wars and the U.S. Civil War, although there's no record of them ever interfering in these events. Of course not. One surviving member of the team, Al Bleak, alleges that the boys' program didn't just travel through time to look at confusing horse statues, but they took multiple trips to research stations in 100,000 BC to collect canisters of light and dark energy, and they were the first of many groups to travel to Mars, which is where the Project Montauk would soon shift its attention. The Montauk Project sent men to Mars. Once researchers at Montauk discovered they could travel through time tunnels to distant points in the Earth's past and future, they soon turned to gaze to the stars, more specifically to Mars. By harnessing the time tunnels, researchers were able to teleport away teams to the red planet, but it wasn't as easy as they believed it would be. Preston Nicholas alleged Montauk researchers spoke of bumps in the road on the way to the Big Red. They first got to Mars and realized that yes, there had been a civilization there at one time, and the above ground of it was crumbled back into dust, but they did detect huge underground installations which were still making magnetic fields and this sort of thing that they could detect, and they realized that there was still machinery running underground. They couldn't figure out how to get down underneath grounds without bringing boring equipment and cutting a tunnel right into it. That was taken care of by psychic all-star Ducan Cameron, who was able to open a portal inside one of the Mars pyramids large enough to fit entry away teams. Now, listen to what I just said. Listen to the sentence. Ducan Cameron, who was able to open a portal inside one of the Mars pyramids, obviously insinuating that there's pyramids on Mars, and if nobody knew that, now you do. I'll have to do a separate video about that. But I like how they just threw that in there with hopes nobody would really get it. The away teams described seeing what was referred to as a solar defense system that had been disabled for many further tests could continue. It is believed that much of the film Total Recall is based on what was found by the Mars away teams. The parallel old universe was like a real-life Star Wars. Okay? According to Preston Nicholas and Ducan Cameron, alleged researchers with the Montauk Project, after successfully traveling through time and teleporting to other planets, scientists tapped into a parallel universe that would come to be known as the Old Universe, an incredibly chaotic dystopia that has managed to bleed into our dimension, likely through the many time tunnels created at Montauk. The Old Universe has also subconsciously influenced much of our popular science fiction. Nicholas said, "It seems to me that it's a parallel universe thing. The legend-based essential that a long time ago there was a parallel universe. Probably most of mankind was in the old universe. It evolved into a totally despotic form of government that took hold and held for millenniums, which is essential what the one world government was here. And what happened was a small rebel group that were fighting this, and the fight continued. It went on and on, just like as in Star Wars. Unfortunately, the two scientists didn't go into how the Montauk Project picked up on this parallel Star Wars universe that genuinely sounds rad, or how it helped turn our universe into a normal, boring universe without lightsabers or X-Wings. A hole in cyberspace led to a big problem for the Montauk Project. Nothing good lasts forever, and after a decade of playing with psychic warfare, time travel, and interplanetary teleportation, the Montauk Project hit two very big snags. First, Alfred Bleek, one of the survivors of the Philadelphia expert, claims that when the USS Eldridge enabled its invisible technology in 1943, he and another officer jumped overboard and were thrown through time to 1983, where they ended up in Long Island. In 1990, he gave a speech at the Mutual UFO Network conference in Dallas, Texas, where he revealed everything that went wrong with the Philadelphia experiment that played a part in ending Project Montauk. Bleek and another officer jumped over the side of the ship expecting to hit water, but we didn't. We wound up in 1983, August 12th, on the shores, if you will, of another project called the Venus Project at Montauk, Long Island, at night. Inside the inner preferential fences, the guards came and grabbed us and took us downstairs. After being rushed into research facility, Bleek and his partner were introduced to researchers who explained that the invisibility technology on the U.S. Eldridge was interfering with technology on Montauk, and that they had to go back in time and shut it off. He continued, "The scientists said, we can't shut it off from here. We can't shut this station down. What has happened is the two experiments in time, exactly 40 years apart, have coupled together to each other and created a hole in hyperspace in which sucked Eldridge in. While all of that was happening, a mutiny was brewing with present day at Montauk, and they chose the exact moment to set things off. The beast behind the I'd smashed the projects to smithereens. While Al Biolick was being filled in on how to shut down the experimental technology aboard the USS Eldridge, several members of the Montauk Project, who had become increasingly unsettled with the trajectory that this research had taken, and who weren't sure about the effect that time travel, space teleportation, and psychological warfare could have on the world, decided to pull the plug on the whole thing. So they finally had got a fucking brain and realized that this wasn't something they should be doing. According to the members of the Montauk team, while the heads of the projects were dealing with the Eldridge, Ducan used the Montauk chair to manifest a creature of his subconsciousness. In every report about Montauk, it is referred as the beast from the ID, and it is materialized as a large hairy monster that smashed its way about the base, destroying and eating everything it could. In order to rid themselves of the BFTI, the beast from the ID, researchers were forced to smash equipment, cut cables, and essentially wreck 10 years of research in an attempt to shut off power to the base transmitters, which powered the chair. Once the source was cut, the beast dissipated from the plane of existence, and the Montauk Project was effectively finished. Hold on, guys. I don't know what just happened. The damn tablet just, got off the page that I was on. Apparently somebody doesn't want me talking about this either. Okay, hold on a second. Let me get back to where I was at. If it ever wants to open up. And I also want to mention that the tip of Montauk, Long Island is exactly on the same latitude and longitude as the Great Pyramid, Khufu's Great Pyramid in Egypt. So there was a strategy to why they built these things, where they built them. It wasn't just, because that's where they decided to, build this shit. It was because there was definitely more to this, than just just Montauk itself. Okay. Alright, where is the page that I was on that had... Hold on, guys. I think they don't want me to continue reading this to you guys. Because some of these things are missing. Hold on. Still waiting. This is not coming up anymore, people. Oh, that's nice. That's really nice. Okay, well, I'm gonna have to find something else that I can finish it with, because they obviously don't want me on that website anymore. Okay, here we go. Here's something that might be interesting. Montauk Project victim exposes time travel, mind control, conspiracy theories, and aliens. And Andy Perro was a survivor of the mind control tactics used in the Montauk Project experiment, shares insight and repressed memories about this experience at the secret military bases. Andy underwent a program which used traumatic mind control and psychic power tactics similar to those used in the Montauk Project. Montauk Project experiments cages of chicken wire fencing with women and children screaming for help. In an interview with E. Francis Lorgren, Andy shared his experience with the trauma-based control of the mind and the Montauk explorations in consciousness. He recalled sessions where he was tortured and put through shock treatments. This was done to have the ability to reprogram participants to do things they were not able to previously do for the project. According to the so-called conspiracy theories, mind control facilities are located all over the country. One in Rochester, New York, one in Paramus, New Jersey, one in Atlanta, Georgia, one at Dobbin Air Force Base, and one in Montauk, Long Island at Dobbins Camp Hero. Andy said that mind control tactics are similar to the Sylvia mind control. He said that when under mind control, he was able to do whatever he was instructed to do. This included 200 push-ups for as long as a half hour. He even lifted a 540-pound barbell and up to 1,500 pounds while under mind control at a training laboratory near the University of Rochester in New York. Okay? So, I mean, guys, this is like, I can't even begin to start on how deep this is, but you know, it's something that I think everybody should look into, because it is really it's really amazing. And the fact that you can actually go there and see this place where this stuff took place. I mean, obviously you can't go in, but you're able to see where this thing goes. So I'm going to leave this as my first Montauk Project video, because there is so much more information, and I want to break down each time traveling experiment that they went to, and what they looked for, and what they were looking for, and all that. So I'm going to leave it here, but I'll try to do part 2 tomorrow. My throat is killing me. I think I'm so used to excuse me, I'm so used to texting that when I talk now, like, my throat hurts. As sad as that is. But that's it for tonight's Montauk Project info. But there will be several chapters to this. I hope you guys enjoyed some of this. If you guys have any question or comments, leave them below as usual. And thank you guys for listening. Okay, guys, this is